Mukam karoti vacharam pangum namarigiri Yakripatamakam Vande Sri Guru Dhinataranam. I offer my respectful obeisances to Spiritual Master, the deliverer of all the souls. His mercy turns it out into appropriate speakers and enables the lame to cross mountains.
Do you need mic? That one, no. Thank you, Prabhu. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatha Deshatharine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. We're reading the third chapter today from Canto 2nd, text 1 to 12. Prabhu.
Sukadeva Goswami said, Maharaj Prabhu, as you have inquired from me as to the duty of intelligent man who is on the threshold of death, so I have answered you. Oh.
One who desires to be absorbed in personal Brahma Jyoti aphorism should worship the master of the Vedas, Lord Brahma, or Brihaspati, the learned priest. One who desires powerful sex should worship the heavenly king Indra, and one who desires good progeny should worship the great progenitors called the Prajapatis. One who desires good fortune should worship Durga Devi, the superintendent of the material world. One desiring to be very powerful should worship fire, and one who aspires only after money should worship the Vasus. One should worship the Rudra incarnations of Lord Shiva if he wants to be a great hero. One who wants a large stock of grain should worship Aditi. One who desires to attain the heavenly planets should worship the sons of Aditi. Built body should worship the demigod Varuna. If one desires to be a greatly learned man, he should worship Lord Shiva. And if one desires a good marital relation, he should worship the chaste goddess Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva.
One should worship Lord Vishnu or his devotees for spiritual advancement in knowledge, and for protection of heredity and advancement of dynasty, one should worship the various demigods.
One who desires domination over a kingdom or an empire should worship the Manus. One who desires victory over an enemy should worship the demons. And one who desires sense gratification should worship the moon. But one who desires nothing of material enjoyment should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
A person who has broad intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, is by all means worship the Supreme Lord, the Personality of God.
All the different kinds of worshippers of multi-demigods can attain the highest perfectional benediction, which is spontaneous attraction unflinchingly fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by the association of the pure devotee of the Lord.
Transcendental knowledge in relation to the Supreme Lord Hari is knowledge resulting in complete suspension of waves and whirlpools of material modes. Such knowledge is self-satisfying due to its being free from material attachment, and being transcendental, it is approved by authorities. Who would fail to be attracted?
Hare Krishna. We're expanding on 10th verse. Akamah sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajita purusham param. Prabhu. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham. We can read it again together. Akamaha sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. word to word. Akamaha, one who has transcended all material desires. Kamaha, one who has the sum total of material desires. Va, either. Moksha kama, one who desires liberation. Udaradhi, with broader intelligence. Tivrena, with great force. Bhakti yogena, by devotional service to the Lord. Yajeta, should worship. Purusham, the Lord. Param, the Supreme Whole. Translation: a person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. Translation: purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Purport, I think I'll just read it and then we can reflect on it together. It's a very good purport. Also, we just read the verses together. Do you mind sitting there a little closer to him? Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, so we just read it, and maybe you guys have seen such instances before. I haven't seen many where there's so many verses clubbed together for reading, 2 to 7, which is very good because it reflects the theme of this entire reading very well. And that is the difference between approaching a demigod versus the personality of God himself. Because if we have desires to fulfill and then we pray, they are fulfilled in both the cases. Even if you approach Krishna directly or the respective demigod, then it is only reasonable to question, then why does it even matter? So Prabhupada explains several different points as to, even though the results may appear to be the same, there is a world of difference when you approach that respective demigod or Krishna directly. So purport: the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is described in the Bhagavad Gita as Purushottama, or the Supreme Personality. It is He only who can award liberation to the impersonalists by absorbing such aspirants in Brahmajyoti, the bodily rays of the Lord. The Brahmajyoti is not separate from the Lord, as the glowing sun ray is not independent of the sun disk. Therefore, one who desires to merge into the supreme impersonal Brahmajyoti must also worship the Lord by Bhakti Yoga, as recommended here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhakti Yoga is especially stressed here as the means of all perfection. In the previous chapters, it's been stated that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal for both Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. And in the same way, in this chapter, it is emphatically declared that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal of the different varieties of worship of different demigods. Bhakti Yoga, thus being the supreme means of self-realization, is recommended here. Everyone must therefore seriously take up the methods of Bhakti Yoga, even though one aspires for material enjoyment or liberation from material bondage. So Prabhupada is saying that, because many times we do encounter questions that when I try to do bhakti, I can clearly see that I'm doing it for other reasons than to please Krishna. Should I continue or should I stop, or how do I fix it immediately? It is, the verse itself says that for whatever reason you want to approach Krishna, you please do. Even if you are having desires, still, you do not stop the process. Prabhupada says further that akamaha is one who has no material desire. Akamaha, a living being, naturally being the part and parcel of the Supreme Whole. Purusham, Purnam, has as his natural function to serve the Supreme Being, just as the parts and parcels of the body or limbs of the body are naturally meant to serve the complete body. Desireless means, therefore, not to be inert like a stone, but to be conscious of one's actual position and thus desire satisfaction only from the Supreme Lord. Because there are, in impersonal concepts, mention of state of desirelessness or just nothingness or beingness. But it is clarified here that that's like being stone and inert, that you can't really remove a desire from a living entity, because I don't want to have a desire is also a desire. So that defeats the entire premise. So it is impossible for a living entity to be with a desire, without a desire, I mean. Therefore, to be without a material desire means akamaha, not to be with no desire at all. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained his desirelessness as bhajanya paramapurushas sukha matrasva sukhatam in his sandarbha. That means that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. This intuition of the living being is sometimes manifested even during the conditioned stage of a living being in the material world. And as such, intuition is expressed in the manner of altruism, philanthropy, socialism, communism, etc., by the undeveloped minds of less intelligent persons. In the mundane field, such an outlook of doing good to others is in the form of society, community, family, country, or humanity, is a partial manifestation of the same original feeling in which a pure living entity feels happiness by the happiness of the Supreme Lord. Such superb feelings were exhibited by the damsels of Rajabhumi for the happiness of the Lord. The gopis loved the Lord without any return. And this is the perfect exhibition of the akamaha spirit. So, the gopis, they only desire Krishna's happiness. It's not that they're sitting there inert without any desire. But the desire is not material. So it is still considered to be akamaha, that is devoid of a desire or devoid of a material desire. Kama spirit, or the desire for one's own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world, whereas the spirit of akamaha is fully exhibited in the spiritual world. Thoughts of becoming one with the Lord or being merged in the Brahma Jyoti can also be exhibitions of Kama spirit if they are desires for one's own satisfaction to be free from material miseries. A pure devotee does not want liberation so that he may be relieved from the miseries of life. Even without so-called liberation, a pure devotee is aspirant for the satisfaction of the Lord. Influenced by the Kama spirit, Arjuna declined to fight in the Kurukshetra battlefield because he wanted to save his relatives for his own satisfaction. But being a pure devotee, he agreed to fight on the instruction of the Lord because he came to his senses and realized that satisfaction of the Lord at the cost of his own satisfaction was his prime duty. Thus he became a Kama. That is the perfect stage of a perfect living being. So here Prabhupada is also giving an example of how if you could be in a Kama platform in bhakti, that you have material desires, but you should still not stop rendering service, because it could be gradually changed to a Kama, as it happened for Arjuna. Something very interesting we read here also, it's a few lines back. Kama spirit, or the desire for own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world, whereas the spirit of akama is fully exhibited in the spiritual world. So Prabhupada is using the word fully, he's not using only. So it seems like there is a spectrum. To say that can akama spirit not exist in the material world is false. Or, sometimes devotees assume that as long as we're in the material body, we will always be on the Kamaha platform that will be serving Krishna with some material desires. But it's a spectrum. In the material world, it fully exhibits. It cannot fully exhibit in the spiritual world. But a Kamaha spirit manifests here also due to the process of bhakti yoga. And we saw, Arjuna is a pure devotee, but he was in the material world during the Leela. And so at that time, a Kamaha spirit did manifest, including the gopis. When the pastimes were performed in our material world, those pastimes were akamaha, or without material desires, but they happened here. So the place is of relevant because it will happen, the akamaha bhakti will happen more so in the spiritual world, to the fullest. But that doesn't mean there's no potential for it here. In fact, there's a lot of potential if one follows the process. So one can also think that, is there any room for Kamaha bhakti to exhibit in the spiritual world? Because that would be the converse of the same statement. I'm sorry for being technical. But perhaps not so much. And Srila Gaur Govind Goswami Maharaj says that in the Vaikuntha planets even, forget about spiritual Vrindavan Dham, that there is no room for Maya. Because Maya is actually away. There are the spiritual worlds, Brahmajyoti, and then there's a Tathastha region. It's kind of like around Brahmajyoti or Brahmajyoti. And then there is the material world full of Maya. So if you can't see Maya, how can you be influenced by it? But we know some instances, and that is perhaps by Bhagwan's own desire in Leela. For example, we saw what happened with Jaya and Vijaya, the gatekeepers of Vaikuntha. When the Sanaka Kumaras came to take darshan of Vishnu, and they were basically asked to leave. There was an element of pride in it. There was an element of kama in it also. But that was because of Krishna's choice, because he wanted to come down during his pastimes and he wanted good competitors to beat with, to enjoy Virya Ras. Who can battle Sri Ram unless one of his own people who was empowered by himself? So, and same goes for Krishna, of course, even more so. So it seems like Kama Bhakti can also manifest in the spiritual world. There are instances. But of course, because everything there and here also ultimately happens out of Krishna's choice. So we must never forget that that will be happening because of Yoga Maya's decision according to Krishna's will, and not out of the nature of the spiritual world itself. Okay, we continue reading. Prabhupada says, Udaradhi means one who has a broader outlook. People with desires for material enjoyment worship small demigods. And such intelligence is condemned in the Bhagavad Gita 7.20 as Ritanana, the intelligence of one who has lost his senses. One cannot obtain any results from demigods without getting sanction from the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a person with a broader outlook can see that the ultimate authority is the Lord, even for material benefits. Under the circumstances, one with a broader outlook, even with the desire for material enjoyment and for liberation, should take to the worship of the Lord directly. And everyone, whether an akama or sakama or mokshakama, should worship the Lord with great expedience. This implies that bhakti yoga may be perfectly administered without any mixture of karma and jnana, as the unmixed sun ray is very forceful and is therefore called tivra. Similarly, unmixed bhakti yoga of hearing, chanting, etc. may be performed by one and all regardless of their inner motive. I think Prabhupada explains every word of the verse very well in this purport. Is one of the purports which I find very fully satisfying. It's like you're able to enjoy the juice of every word of the verse. One thing for us to note is that here, Sukadev Goswami in the verse, he is categorizing bhakti on 3 levels. Akamaha, mokshakamaha, sakamaha. Actually said in the opposite order, but sakamaha means if you're conducting bhakti but still with some material desires in your heart. Akamaha means no personal desires of your own, only to please Krishna. And mokshakama means that you don't have material desires as such, but you have desire for liberation, which is not to serve or please Krishna, but for your own liberation, that I want to get free from suffering, basically. Now, it is a little bit spiritual for sure, but ultimately, it's the nature of our scriptures and how they reveal themselves to the reader. Because if we read Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is trying his best to not be very direct. If you look at the Krishna in Vrindavan, he is very lovable, he is loving, he performs sweet pastimes. And the Krishna in Kurukshetra Bhumi seems to be a little dry by some people. But if you actually look at it, he's very sweet. Because he's not directly saying that, hey, I'm your lover, you love me. He's giving all the lectures about karma yoga, jnana yoga, even ashtanga yoga. What is samadhi, what is dhyana, and then you become free. He's not able to gather guts to say that I love you, can't you just love me back? It's as simple as that. Because it hurts. Even on a material platform, we can understand to seek appreciation or love or affection from someone hurts. It belittles you if you really care. And if you have that softness in your heart. And Krishna, whose lotus feet are described to be softer than lotus petals, what to speak of his heart, how can he say that, just directly love me? Unless after giving all these lectures, he himself knows, and he always knew, that even these things won't really relieve you ultimately. So for your own benefit, even though it's hurting me to say that you love me, I will still say it. So gradually, very gradually, he reveals in Bhagavad Gita, and very slowly. In Srimad Bhagavatam, through Sukadev Goswami and other speakers and other stories, he becomes a little direct, more direct than Bhagavad Gita. He clearly keeps saying in several instances that I am the only one who you can love, who you can come. Even if you try to liberate yourself from the material world, it won't really satisfy you. Only for a while it may feel like you're satisfied, but it's only a temporary relief. Your heart is still longing for me. So he becomes a little more direct in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he becomes even more direct, where when he came as Mahaprabhu, he's clearly saying that devotees don't even look at liberation, or liberation guards the door of bhakti, the palace of bhakti. That means that liberations not even enter. And a guard is not, it's a part of the palace, right? The security guard. But they don't enjoy the things that happen at the palace. So he becomes that direct. And if the writings of our Goswami are ever to be read by people like me in, I don't know, whatever lifetime we get there, to be eligible to read, then how direct are our Goswamis? Ultimately Krishna, because he's inspiring them to write it. So how direct is Krishna in their writings? It is surprising. In fact, Rupa Goswami, when in his writings, he's very direct. He's like, what is this moksha kama? That there are three kind of desires. Like Shukadev Goswami, I mean, he's not directly mentioning it, but he's choosing to not even consider moksha kama as spiritual. He's like, there are only two types of bhakti, kama and sakama, that's all. Moksha kama is also kama. Because you're desiring your personal release from suffering. It has nothing to do with pleasing Krishna. And who desires liberation anyway? Only who suffers, right? A very mundane example, but if you happen to fall in love with someone, and if you sit right close to them, you're in their company. Who wants to run away from that experience? Who wants to say that free me from this loving experience? Nobody. It's only when it's suffering you want to liberate yourself, right? So how can there be a desire for liberation in bhakti? When the experience moment to moment, in bhakti I'm saying, not in the run-up to generating bhakti bhav in yourself, forget about prema. So when moment to moment experience in bhakti is so sweet, why would one want to be free from that? There is no question of liberation. So that is that. So Rupa Goswami actually, I had something here. Yes, he uses the word moksha, lagutakrit. Laghu means small. In his writings, he says, what is that? That's nothing. And actually, we can understand it from an example from the pastimes of Sri Ram. When Krishna came as Lord Ramachandra and he was exiled, he went to Dandakaranya, the forest area. There were some rishis, there were some sages who were already perfected in their own self. So they were on the moksha platform. They were self-realized sages. When they looked at Sri Ram, and how beautiful Sri Ram is, and in his incarnation as Lord Ram, Krishna is choosing to hide his beauty in multiple ways, but of course he can't. So they look at him and they don't think that, oh, I want to worship you. The desire sprouts in their hearts that I want you as my husband. And we're talking about these male-bodied, apparently, but self-realized souls who don't have material desires, only moksha desire left, if at all. And they're on that platform. They may not even be desiring, many of them, moksha, moment to moment. They look at Lord Ram and they're like, can I have you as my husband? This comes in their heart. Can you imagine how beautiful Lord must be? Even as a warrior, Sri Ram in the exile. Forget about flute playing Krishna. So, and then our acharyas described that when the gopis performed Rasa Leela pastime with Krishna, there were different kinds of gopis there. A few were Nitya Siddha gopis who descended from Goloka just to join Krishna's pastime here. A few were actually those spirit souls from Dandakaranya who desired to achieve Krishna and Sri Ram as their husbands, so Krishna blessed them. And then they appeared as gopis in the Vrindavan pastime, and then they also became Nitya Siddhas because, of course, they were in touch with Krishna now. So, moksha kama is very little. The Dandakaranya sages demonstrated very clearly. Okay, so here, another thing which is pretty interesting to note. One other example from the past times, which is very close to our tradition of Lord Chaitanya, Can you guess? This is around the same theme of converting moksha kama to akama. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, yes. When Mahaprabhu met Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was at the time the topmost scholar of the impersonalists. He was popular anyway in his argument, undefeated. Mahaprabhu listened to him very well for multiple days. And then he gradually made him realize the importance of what is bhakti and how tasteless is this liberation that impersonalists talk about. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, we can clearly say that from his moksha kama, he got into ecstatic devotion. But what about, for all of us, because we're not, maybe you choose to not reveal yourself, but many of us are on the sakama platform, not even on moksha kama platform. What about us? Well, there are some examples. What about Bilva Mangala Thakur, who had a lot of material desires? He's an acharya, or a devotee, at least, but he had a lot of lust. And out of that, we're talking about sex here, and he even got into seeing prostitute and developing a lot of attachment. So there's a whole long story, but the essential point is that because of devotional practice, the bhakti that we perform as a practice, the Vedi bhakti, because of that he got transformed, and then he could get to pure devotional service. There are multiple examples of this actually. Anyway, here Prabhupada also explains in the purport of the previous verses that we just read, is that even though worshipping demigods may give us those respective results, it is still a limited picture, and people with a broader perspective, with a broader view, will only directly worship Krishna. Now, what does he mean by that? Sometimes, this to give you an example of our own day-to-day activities at the temple, one may feel like getting a $100 vacuum cleaner is a lot of expense, right? But there is an outlook that it is a one-time investment, and it's very hard to lose a vacuum cleaner compared to a broom. Some of them are quite heavy, and they're very effective in cleaning. They save time. They're also a little fun, so one may feel a little lazy to broom, which is not a good thing. If you broom, you actually will develop more bhakti. But a vacuum cleaner will make sure the temple remains cleaner more or less. And I think we have vacuum. I don't know if we have it here or not. But if someone with a broader outlook can imagine that a little investment can really give us a longer term, better results. So, or subscribing for a Canva premium subscription or something like that, one can feel like it's unnecessary expense in the short term. Why don't you take the same $50 and get some prasadam distributed to people? But that is a very short-term perspective, even though that is bhakti. That's just an example. So if I worship a demigod and I get some material opulence or whatever that I want, my job is performed here. But then in the longer term, that doesn't really fulfill you. Because ultimately a living entity is seeking happiness and fulfillment. Who doesn't want that? And the worst case, actually, I don't know how to be more direct, but I'm saying that imagine if you did not want something. If you wanted something and you don't get it, that's very sad, right? I want to marry someone, they don't like me. That's very sad. I want a big bungalow and I don't get it. That's very sad. But imagine if you wanted someone and you get it and you're still sad. I don't want to give personal examples from my life, but whenever we crave for something with a lot of desire and when we get it really, and there is some mercy upon us, we're not so much deeply dipped in ignorance, we will clearly see that I'm still not satisfied. That is a sad situation. You worked really hard to crack IIT, you want it really bad, or some entrance exam, and you do get it, and you're not happy. That is worse than not getting it, right? So we're allowed to. Vedas give us prescriptions on performing various yajnas to please different demigods, devis and devatas, to get our desires fulfilled. But that still doesn't satisfy the living entity who is ultimately seeking to serve Krishna, to love Krishna, to experience that love. So the purpose itself is defeated. Therefore, the bhakti yoga traditions discourage going to demigods for anything. An example is given by Purport and Srila Prabhupada. The very apt example is of Ravan. Because Prabhupada explains that worshipping Lord Shiva, among many things, can give you a lot of power. Ravan worshipped Lord Shiva, even chopped his 9 heads off, gave it to him in the yajna process. And how much power did he get? He was ruling the 3 worlds in the material world. The king of the heavens, Indra, was terrified by the mention of names of Ravan. It is said that he had captured the celestial bodies of Saturn, Venus, Mercury, and so on and so forth, because these celestial objects are used to predict our destiny in the astrological systems. They are ultimately expansions of Vishnu of a particular universe, and their job is to give results of our karma through a systematic order. So even Krishna loves systems, orders, and organizations. So when we perform in a very disorganized way, it is not in the favor of Krishna's nature. I'm telling you, all servants who serve with me. So just to deliver the results of our action, which Krishna can do in an instant, he set subsystems. There are Manus, there are Digpalas, there are Dwarpalas, then there are local deities, there are Kshetrapalas. So many arrangements, there are demigods. And then there are these celestial bodies. Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, so on and so forth. People are very scared of Saturn. But Saturn is not doing anything. Shani is only giving the results of our own action to us, ultimately our own actions. So, all this arrangement Krishna makes. So every Devi or Devata has a certain duty to be performed, and you can go to them to get that. So Ravana was so strong that he actually captured, which means that he basically took charge of his own destiny. He was that powerful that even if Saturn, of course you can't deny the results of your actions because Krishna sanctions it. You by your intent and because of Krishna's desire, it gets sanctioned. But you can delay it, and that's what Ravan did. Ultimately, he was slain. He saw his sons died. His main son die, Meghnath, Indrajit, other name, who was very dear to him. He saw his own dear Lanka burnt to ashes. So it is not that he didn't get results of his actions. He very much suffered. But he could delay it because of the powers that he had. That is also, of course, due to Leela, because it's ultimately Krishna's plan. But we can look at it from a limited perspective that he could actually delay it because he could take charge of the local celestial bodies of this universe. So, Ravan got so much power by worshipping Mahadev, by Lord Shiva, but that couldn't help him ultimately because his heart wasn't pure. He wasn't doing bhakti. So he still ended up challenging Sri Ram. And then he was slain. His whole empire was demolished and his wife was widowed. Who wants something like that? So we can go to demigods for having certain desires fulfilled. I was with my very dear relatives yesterday because they had some baby twins delivered now. Many congratulations to them. But many families you go to and you see they're worshipping really many Devi and Devatas, Lord Ganesh, multiple one of them, very cute. And they all are very, because with pure intent, if you worship them, they also try their best to elevate you to platform of bhakti. This is according to Shastra, not my speculation. It is risky though, so it is not recommended. So I can clearly see that in the society there are misconceptions because apparently there's something called sutakaha, patakaha and various concepts. Then when a soul passes away, there's a death in the family, a birth in the family, then certain religious rules are followed stricter than regular. So for a period of what is called a mandala, for 40 days, 21 days or whatever, they don't perform certain rituals. So I was surprised to hear that they were not ready to perform the chanting of the name of Lord even, or visit a Krishna temple. And I was like, how is that possible? Because that has gotten into the society, that they're confusing demigods with the personality of Godhead himself. I mean, what is a better time than when you're in a difficult or on an auspicious situation, such as a birth in your family, than to go to Krishna? Of course, all times are auspicious, but that is the time you must go. But they think it's the same thing. There are certain rituals which affect the prana or the subtle bodies in our own body. And when a woman gives birth, when she's during her menses, her menstruation cycles, when someone in your family passes away, those crude rituals which are not bhakti oriented as such, which are material oriented, of course sanctioned by Vedas but not bhakti oriented, they are not recommended to be performed, because they have an impact over your subtle bodies. You're sensitive at that time. Your environment in the family is sensitive at that time. Garud Puran explains it as the soul which has left is traveling through different realms and planets and ultimately getting it to where it needs to be. So certain rituals can disturb the whole process. So it is recommended to keep it low. But who can recommend to not do bhakti? In fact, at that time you need it even more. So that is the platform, that is the social conceptions where it's gotten to. But Prabhupada clearly explains the difference between the demigods and Krishna. Right? We never hear Bhagwan Surya or Bhagwan Varuna. At most we hear Bhagwan Shankar, because there is a form of Lord Shiva as Sadashiva which eternally exists, which is an expansion of Krishna. Even though the tattva is different as Shiva tattva, but the tattva appears different to us only because of influence of Maya Devi. Because if Krishna touches Maya, then we won't be able to experience him as pure Krishna, because we are under Maya's influence. So the whole realm of Shiva tattva is because of the influence of Maya that it appears and functions different. But if you look at the Acharyas describe, Krishna expands as Balaram, and then two quadruple next, and then fourth, and then Sadashiva comes in that. So the tattva is different, but he's an expansion. So at most, and the other day even you might have heard Bhakti Ashram Maharaj himself using the word Bhagavan Shankar for a certain aspect of Lord Shiva. So we can go at only as much as that. But who says Bhagavan Indra? Or even, Bhagavan Ganesh. I respect him a lot. But the essential difference is that Devis we never say Krishna Dev. I mean, as a love, when in certain bhajans we say Krishna Deva Bhavantu one day or something. But the Shastras rarely use, they don't call Krishna as a Devata. And the scriptures, especially which reveal himself fully, such as Srimad Bhagavatam, they never will describe Krishna as a Devata. They'll clearly say Krishna is to Bhagavan, Swayam, Bhagavan. They'll use that word. So these are not random words. Okay? So, as a very commonly known analogy is there, that if you water the roots of a plant, the whole plant gets watered. So if you approach Krishna directly, your material desires are also fulfilled, if they are for your benefit. See, the ultimate result of approaching Krishna and worshipping him is that you get satisfied. Now, whether or not your material desire gets fulfilled, I'm sorry to break this news to you. Because sometimes, to give you an example, if we love someone and if we think getting married to them will be the biggest blessing of our life, but you don't know what will happen, how will that person turn out to be? Now, if that desire doesn't get fulfilled because of Krishna's presence in our life, we think something bad has happened to us. Well, he's only saved us. And this is the most relatable example, so I'm using it. Right? So, worshipping Krishna will give you satisfaction, whether or not your desires get fulfilled. But if you do desire to learn mridanga or something, even if it appears material to you right now, but it will help you to be happier and to serve Krishna better, then Krishna will fulfill it. What's his problem? The one who owns not only our but all the universes in the world hesitates to give you a person or a car or a tiny house. That is not his nature. So, that is the essential difference between approaching demigods separately and Krishna directly, is that you are guaranteed happiness when approaching directly. Anyway, another thing that happens when you approach Krishna directly is that your material desires get purified also. Is that Ravana worshipped Lord Shiva himself, and who is very exalted, of course, pure devotee of the Lord, topmost devotee. but because his objective was not to worship Krishna. Anything else other than that. You see what happened, how much he suffered seeing his kingdom burn and his children die, and his position being lost. He was very attached to his power and position. He lost it. So that was the worst suffering for him. So ultimately, distress can come and will come if Krishna is not in the picture. In fact, who else to go for? To learn about, because we looked at some of the examples of moksha kama bhakti and sakama bhakti, and how that with the process of bhakti transforms into akama bhakti. But what about akama bhakti itself, the pure devotional service? What about it? I mean, who else to learn it from? Krishna. I mean, there are many, Prabhupada and many pure devotees are here for us to learn from. But Krishna sets the best example as himself, as Lord Chaitanya. When Krishna incarnated as Gauranga Mahaprabhu, to demonstrate the best of devotion, he has to take in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So she is the best devotee we know. So her mood is the topmost. But as Gaur Govind Maharaj also describes, that she is the guru of Nitya Siddhas. She is the leader of them. For those of us, unless you happen to be incognito, Nitya Siddha, then for us our guru are both Radha and Balaram, but as a priority Nityananda Prabhu, Balaram Tattva. So, but to demonstrate the highest devotion, Krishna has to bring in Radharani into the picture. There's no other way. Who's higher than her in her bhava? So he comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in her mood, as a joint incarnation of Radha Krishna, and he demonstrates what is akama bhakti or pure bhakti in Shikshashtakam, the verses that he's given us. He mentions that in Shikshashtakam, na dhanam na janam na sundarim, bhavatad bhakti rahita ki tvai. He's clearly mentioning here that no material desires. Not only that, in another verse he says, is it even here? It's not here, but he talks about life after life. We also heard, I think in the Guru Ashtakam, that Janama Janama. Where do we hear it? Janama Janama, Hey Ehi Abhilash. We also heard in some bhajan something, Janama Janama Hoy Ehi Abhilash. So, a devotee, because usually the impersonalists think that getting out of the cycles of birth and death means getting free from suffering, and then that is the ultimate object. But a devotee says that you bring me back. He's not even, a pure devotee doesn't even say that, okay, you take me to your spiritual world so I can be relieved from my suffering. Because that is just impersonalism in disguise. Because there's not an element of pleasing Krishna there. That is selfish, that you want to be free from suffering. But a devotee demonstrates, an akama bhakti devotee demonstrates, a pure devotee demonstrates by saying that even if it means coming back here again, or going there, or wherever you keep me, out of your own choice, I'm ready. That is the demonstration. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself demonstrates it. Okay. So, I think we're towards the end of it. We can sing a little bhajan because that demonstrates the mood really well. We started quite late, so we're before time technically. I would like one of my friends to sing it. Can you sing it for me? This one is called Kabe Habe. Why are we singing this right now? No, this is important to note though, so please hear me, that we just understood that different types of bhakti, moksha kama, sakama, with desire, with even a desire of liberation, is not good enough. We have to get to akama. But how to get there is through a regular process. But there's only one thing that is needed. Of course, you need to do sadhana, but there's only one thing that is needed. Can you guess? How do you get that desire? But you're right, you're spot on actually. I'm going to use another word for it. Yes, that is it. That is it, perfect. So Srila Rupa Goswami says that you need lolyam, and that is the only price of bhakti. He says, Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitha mati tatra lolyam api molyam ekalam. This is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says lolyam, or the earnestness or the desire to serve Krishna, the spontaneous desire to serve Krishna, is the only currency through which you can purchase this. In fact, His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu says that without, I don't want to get any word wrong, but spontaneous loving devotion, I don't think he uses the word spontaneous, but that's essentially what he means. Spontaneous loving devotion, which happens organically out of your own nature. You cannot go to Vrindavan. You cannot go to Vrindavan, even if you get 1,000 initiations. He says, with the Vaidhi Bhakti or with the Sadhana Bhakti, with the regulative devotion, you can get as much as to Vaikuntha planets. But to get to Krishna in His sweetest mellows in Sri Vrindavan Dham, in Golok Dham, you have to get, sooner or later, to the platform of loving spontaneous, loving devotional service. That is, for you, it's not a task to do it, just as natural as it for you to breathe right now. Devotion or doing things for Krishna becomes that natural to you. Every step, it's very natural for you to take a step when you want to walk, right? It's very natural for your heart to be beating right now. It flows out of you so naturally. And how do you get to that state? Is through Laulyam. So in the bhajan, which is by what, Narottam Das Thakur? Who was in the Bhakti Vinod Thakur writes this bhajan, Kabe habe bolo se deena mar. So he's clearly saying that when. So you will sing it, Prabhu, for us. So wait one sec. I'll read the translation. The translation says, when will I become humbler then? When? Oh, when will that day come? When will that day be mine? When will you erase my offenses and give my heart a taste for chanting the holy name in purity? When will I become humbler than grass, tolerant, respectful to all, and relish the essence of the holy name? When will I abandon desires for wealth, followers, and bodily pleasure, and receive causeless devotion, birth after birth? When will chanting Krishna's name produce ecstatic symptoms and tears? When will I wander through Navadvip singing the names of God and Nityananda? When will Lord Nityananda free me from Maya and grant me entrance into the marketplace of the holy name? When will I become intoxicated with the nectar of the holy name through saintly association? When will I develop compassion for all living beings and humbly preach Mahaprabhu's message? This bhajan is Laulyam personified.
You can remove the mic, the voice will not come, it will cancel that.